I'm your host, Stephen Hanks, and I welcome you to a radio show that discusses all the fascinating aspects of life in Sedona and the Verde Valley area. Today's show and all my shows until the end of May are being sponsored by an outstanding real estate company that services the Sedona area. Damian and Danielle's Sedona Village Real Estate Group with Coldwell Banker Realty should be your go-to real estate agents in the Sedona area. Why? Because their experience and their dedication to the community matter. As always, my producer behind the glass is Ryan Thompson. Ryan, I hope you had a great week since we were together here last.
I always do up here, man.
Yeah, you were holding the fort in this radio station. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Mr. Producer, do you notice anything different about my attire in the studio today?
The full base-up garb, yeah, it kind of stands out. Luckily, we didn't wear the same thing.
Yeah, and what is it that I'm wearing?
You're fully decked out like you're going to pitch 7 innings today. You got the baseball uniform on.
I'm in my Sedona Red Rock High School uniform because right after the show, the minute after this show ends, I need to race as much as I can race in my advanced age. 10 minutes over to Red Rock High School, where I'm coaching a doubleheader today. So, so this is a perfect day to talk about baseball, which Absolutely. We're going to get to. Just to bring my listeners, I know my listeners over the first 6 shows have learned a lot of things about what I do in Sedona. I don't know how much about my background I've talked about, other than being, for years a magazine publisher and editor. But my baseball life has been extensive. It's probably been one of the most important parts of my life and one of my passions since I was a kid. I started playing baseball right around the time I was about 9 in Little League, and I am still playing, and it's almost 60 years later. I probably shouldn't have said that because it's given away my age, which I don't know if I wanted everybody to know. But at this advanced age, I still play in a men's senior baseball league up in Phoenix and Scottsdale. And that's the baseball, and of course coaching the Red Rock team. But aside from that, I started my magazine publishing career as an editor and a writer on the late great Sport magazine, which was a great national magazine, which actually was around about 7 years before Sports Illustrated started. And I was one of the baseball experts on the magazine at the time I worked there. I eventually started my own sports magazine in New York in the early 80s. And I actually once worked on magazines for Major League Baseball. In the mid 90s, Major League Baseball decided that they wanted to publish a magazine for kids that they would hand out at various ballparks. And the magazine company in New York that I was working for at the time had the contract for Major League Baseball publications, and we would produce the All-Star Game program and the playoff programs. And Major League Baseball decided to start a magazine for kids, and I was kind of the lead person on that. So baseball has been a huge part of my life. I like playing it. I like talking about it. And I thought, even though this is a Sedona show, I know that we have a ton of people who live here who are Arizona Diamondback fans. And because there are also a lot of people who are transplanted, like me from New York, they're interested in what's going to happen in Major League Baseball. And with the season starting on Thursday this week, at least the season in the States, there were a couple of games this past week where the Dodgers and Padres played in Seoul, South Korea. I felt like I had to devote this week's show to a 2024 Major League Baseball preview with, of course, a focus on the National League Championship champion Arizona Diamondbacks. And my very special guest to discuss the best sport ever invented, in my humble opinion, will be Steve Gilbert, who covers the D-backs as a reporter for MLB.com. But before we talk all things baseball with Steve, It's time for the segment we always do at the top of this show, Steven's Sedona Scene, when I tell you all about some exciting events happening over the next week in Sedona and the Verde Valley. Today. I get my Saturdays mixed up when I do this segment. On Saturday, March 30th, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., the city of Sedona is hosting its 13th annual celebration of spring, which the planners are saying will be the best one yet. There will be a carnival, a petting zoo, an egg hunt, prizes, bounce houses, vendors, the Easter Bunny, if you're into that thing, and all in the celebration of spring. The egg hunts are free and will be available for children 12 years of age and younger. Children will be divided by age groups, and there will be over 22,000 eggs waiting to be found. Remember, children will need to bring their own baskets. The carnival area with rides is $5 for each person. The celebration of spring will be at the Posse Grounds Park, 525 Posse Ground Road. Visit sedonaaz.gov/rec, REC, events for more information. Ryan, I mentioned this last week. During my last 10 years living in New York before I moved to Sedona 3 years ago, I was very involved in the Manhattan cabaret entertainment world, and I performed a cabaret show featuring the songs of Don McLean. Are you old enough to know Don McLean?
American Pie, baby, of course.
There you go. There you go. And my music director for all 10 of those shows I performed over 3 years was a fantastic award-winning guitarist named Sean Harkness. Well, it happens that Sean will be in our area twice, displaying his guitar mastery in concert. The first, this coming Friday, March 29th at 7 p.m. at Cottonwood's Old Town Center for the Arts. And tickets for that, you go to oldtowncenter.org/events. And then the following night, March 30th at 7 p.m., Sean is going to be at the Jim and Linda Lee Performing Arts Center at Yavapai College in Prescott. For tickets to that one, go to ycpac.com and click on events. And finally, if you listened to my show last Saturday, you heard the producer Camilla Ross, director Dev Ross, and the star of the one-woman show, Mindy Mendelsohn, talk about the play 2.5-Minute Ride, presented by Camilla Ross's Emerson Theater Collaborative, and which continues its weekend run tonight at 7 p.m. and tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Brady Hall at the Verde Valley School, which is at 3511 Verde Valley School Road in the village of Oak Creek. For tickets, go to emersontheatercollaborative.org. And by the way, folks, I saw that show last night. It is excellent. Mindy Mendelsohn is doing a one-woman show. It's a heavy show because it deals with the Holocaust and about family issues, about dysfunction in families. But I promise you there are some really humorous parts of the show, and it's definitely worth checking out. So go to emersontheatercollaborative.org today and get tickets for tonight and tomorrow afternoon. And now it's time to talk about one of my lifelong passions, baseball. And to do that this morning, I want to welcome to the show Steve Gilbert, Arizona Diamondbacks reporter for MLB.com. Steve, welcome to Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks.
Hey, Stephen, it's good to be with you. I'd rather be up in Sedona today, but it's nice to be with you anyway.
Well, that's great. Well, I don't know. I might want to trade places and come out and cover an exhibition game today. I don't know. But
well, you go ahead and do that, and I'll do some hiking up there in the Red Rock. How about that? We'll make that a deal.
There you go. Can you coach my high school team while you're over here?
How much coaching do they need? I don't know how much I can teach them, but I'll try.
I am not going to answer that on the grounds it may incriminate me. Anyway, so let's talk. I want to start talking about the Diamondback, preview of the Diamondbacks for 2024, and then we'll take it from there. So you kind of can call the Diamondbacks one of the surprise teams of last year mainly because they got to the World Series. The regular season, and this is what happens in baseball now, as you know, because of the extended playoffs. You can have you can be a little bit over 500, and if you get hot at the right time, if your pitching is on fire, if you get the right matchups, you can go pretty far in the playoffs, like the Diamondbacks did last year. I was reading a quote. The GM Mike Hazen said, where he said the thing we walked into the offseason with before the run happened, and even during the run, was when you boil it down to 162 games, we were an 84-win team. That's awesome, but the 162 is what's in front of us, not what can happen if we do a good job in that 162. So my question to you is, somebody who saw the team last year all the time and has been following them in the spring, what made them click last year, especially at the end, and how do you see the dynamic changing going into this 2024 season?
Yeah, Stephen, it was an interesting year last year for sure. I think we all kind of expected going into the year the Diamondbacks would be better than they had been with their 74 wins in 2022. And, from that standpoint, I think the 84 wins was not a huge surprise. I probably had them pegged more like a 79, 80 win team. But again, when you get into the postseason and things start to go your way, it can snowball. And I think that's what happened for the Diamondbacks. And it's one of those, that's a recipe that's tough to repeat. And so I think what Mike Hazen looked at when he saw his team is he saw a team, as he said, that was outscored over the course of a regular season, and somehow got into the playoffs by just one game, and then got hot. And he doesn't feel like that's a sustainable formula. So that's why he went out and made some acquisitions this offseason to try to make the team better, whether that's Eduardo Rodriguez or Gino Suarez. Those kind of moves that he made was kind of a nod to the fact that, got into the playoffs last year, had this, amazing run to the World Series, but you can't count on those kind of, getting hot at the right time every year. So wanted to make sure that his roster was a little bit better so that they didn't have to worry about maybe squeaking into the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and that's what makes a great general manager. You look at the team objectively. You try not to be passionate and go with whatever happened in the last couple of weeks, especially when you're going from one season into another. And I think a lot of people think that Mike Hazen's one of the really great young general managers in the game, and he's been proving it. So going into this year, what do you, besides the couple of players you mentioned, and you mentioned Suarez is going to be taking over third base, and who else are we talking about?
Eduardo Rodriguez in the rotation.
Rodriguez, right. So, what do you think the dynamic is different this year with the moves? I mean, I read one story, I think it was in the AZ Republic, where they were talking about how the Diamondbacks sacrificed a little team speed for more power. Do you analyze it that way? How do you think the dynamic's going to change this year?
Yeah, I think, last year with the rule changes, it timed up perfectly for the Diamondbacks in terms of they had some young players that could really run on the bases, starting with Corbin Carroll. But again, I think, Hazen looked at a team that had been outscored, and the best way to score runs in baseball, as Earl Weaver always used to say, is the three-run homer. And so they wanted to add some more power to that lineup. So that's what they did with Suarez, which takes away a little bit of speed. Josh Rojas had a little bit of speed at third base, but they're going to add some power with Suarez being there.
And Jock Peterson,
Jake McCarthy,
right?
Jock Peterson, yep. Jock Peterson's going to be the DH, so that's hopefully adds some power for them. But that's kind of the way they look at it. They still have guys that can run, obviously Corbin, but also Alec Thomas, can run. Ketel Marte can run. Perdomo can run a little bit. So they still have that aspect, but they don't want to be so reliant on, and this day and age of baseball, it's not the same as it was where back in the day when you could, try to put three string 3 hits together to score a run. Now they want to do it with one swing. So I think that was just kind of what his thought process was, let's get some more power in this lineup.
Yeah. One thing that I think a lot of fans, even knowledgeable fans, neglect to think about when a season begins, especially with a young team, is how those young players are going to improve while the season is going on, as they're getting game experience. You can start a season with a couple of young players and maybe look at the team and say, well, maybe they'll be a contender. But when you have those young guys who are kind of unknowns, even though they may have potential, you don't know what they're going to become when you get to the midpoint of the season or even toward the end. And if these guys blossom at the right time, then you're talking about a whole different dynamic on the team. Is that what you saw happen with the Diamondbacks last year? Their young players were kind of still unknowns, but they really developed, and that's what got the team to the World Series.
Well, I think a lot of us didn't know much about Gabriel Moreno behind the plate when they acquired him from Toronto.
Right.
But they were so excited about being able to get him, and I think we saw by the end of the season why they were so excited about him. And he did an outstanding job for them in the first couple of rounds of the playoffs. I think you saw Alec Thomas step up in a huge moment against Craig Kimbrell in the National League Championship Series. Otherwise, they don't win that series. So
right.
I think that was one of the things that was really encouraging for them, is to see the way some of these young guys on the biggest stage there is in baseball, in the fall, where we're able to step up and play well. Brandon Pfaadt, I almost forgot. He was the guy that without him pitching well, they don't get to the World Series. And he had some struggles early in the year, but put it together towards the end. So, I think that that's something that we saw last year with them, is that they kind of came together and had a few breaks go their way in that wild card series against the Brewers, and that seemed to just kind of increase their confidence and give them some momentum that they ran the whole way.
Yeah, I read your predicting the Diamondbacks opening day roster last week on MLB.com, which was a great analysis. And I wanted to ask you now about the pitching, which is the most important thing without question for any contending team. You might as well pack it in if you don't have a pretty solid 5-man rotation and a reliable bullpen. So, they've got in the rotation, they've got Gallen and Kelly and Pfaadt, who really came through last year as a young pitcher. How do you see that rotation working out this year, and especially on the back end?
Yeah, I think, Eduardo Rodriguez was a huge pickup for them. His injury is obviously concerning. He's got a lat strain, which is going to keep him out here for a little bit. That was diagnosed this past week. He had to leave Tuesday's game in the second inning with some tightness in the lat, and just found out through an MRI that he's going to have to start the year on the injured list. Now, they don't think it's all that serious. They don't think it will keep him out for a long period of time, but he was somebody they were certainly counting on, so they wouldn't have to go with 3 younger pitchers in their starting rotation, which they'll have to do now to open the season. Probably, as you mentioned, Brandon Pfaadt being one. I think you'll see probably Tommy Henry and Ryan Nelson win those final 2 spots in the rotation, although Bryce Jarvis is still in camp and still a candidate. So I think that kind of was a little bit of a blow, this injury, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be something that's going to keep him out for a long period of time. And so they're optimistic from that standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't it seem like almost every team has one of these pitchers go down in spring training? I mean, you kind of can set your watch.
You're never going to get through a whole season. Yeah, it used to be, I can't remember. I think you have to go back to the beginning of the 2000s, the last time a team only used 5 starters the entire season. So you're going to use 9, maybe even 10 starters over the course of the season, possibly more, depending on injuries, depending on, how guys pitch. So that's why the depth is so important. So adding Rodriguez was important because it gave them a little extra depth to deal with an injury, and that just happens to be his injury. But they do have a little bit of depth now to kind of handle that.
Yeah, talk a little bit about these guys like Nelson and Henry. I don't know much about them. What's the deal with them? What's their upside? And just give me a scouting report on them.
Yeah, Nelson throws harder than Henry does. He's a right-hander. They're working. He spent a lot of time trying to improve his slider this offseason to give him, that pitch would be really effective to go with the way he throws his fastball. And so far this spring, the results have been encouraging. His sliders looked a lot sharper. He was throwing more of a kind of a between a cutter and a slider last year. Now it's a sharper slider. So they're optimistic that can help him kind of take the next step. Whereas Henry's a left-hander, reaches 90 maybe on the radar gun, but he's got a really good curveball, good changeup, really a smart pitcher, poised to pitch for the University of Michigan on the biggest college stage in the College World Series. So they like both of those guys. Bryce Jarvis is the son of former big leaguer Kevin Jarvis, who pitched for the Diamondbacks briefly.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
He's a guy that if he doesn't make the rotation, he could be a long man in the bullpen. So they're kind of excited about some of those young arms. Obviously, they'd like to get Rodriguez back as soon as possible, but
right.
They do have some options now.
Yeah, so let's talk about the all-important bullpen, which, obviously you can't win a pennant without a great one. You may disagree with me on this. I'm a little skeptical about the Diamondbacks bullpen in terms of depth, and also, although I know Paul Sewald has been pretty effective the last couple of years, I'm a little bit skeptical about him as being considered a high-end closer. He seems to be the kind of guy who could backtrack this year. It's just a sense I have from watching baseball my whole life, and actually I saw him with the Mets when he was with the Mets. Where do you see the D-backs bullpen lining up and being effective this year?
That was one of the things that came together for them towards the end of the year that helped them, make the postseason and then advance in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how bullpens work from year to year. You're never quite sure if you can count on them from year to year. Performances vary far more in the bullpen than they do in the starting rotation or in position players. So to your point, the bullpen was really struggled the first half of the season. When they got Sewald, that seemed to kind of steady things at the back end. Meanwhile, Kevin Ginkel, a former U of A pitcher, came into his own as a setup guy and got hot. They called up Andrew Saalfrank, who, Saalfrank wasn't the guy that was on anybody's radar, even 2 months into the season. And he ended up having a great run for them. So, again, those performances are hard from year to year to carry over. Ryan Thompson, they claimed him on waivers. Any other team could have had Ryan Thompson, and he ends up becoming their key setup man along with Ginkel in the postseason. So the bullpen certainly looks better on paper right now, but we'll see how it holds up over the course of the season. I think we'll probably find that some guys that we think are going to be big parts of it are going to struggle, and guys that we don't think are going to be big parts of it are going to be the ones that step up and end up carrying the team.
Yeah, a little quick comment about the bench. One of the things about baseball now, even with the expansion to 26 players on the roster, with so many pitchers that every team has to keep, it keeps the bench in some cases 3-4 guys. I mean, if a team has, I remember when I was growing up watching the Mets when Tom Seaver was my hero. The Mets had a 10-man rotation, and there were 7 guys on the bench on a 25-man roster. Now you've got 3 or 4 guys on the bench. One of them has to be a catcher because you got to have a backup catcher. So how do you see the bench working out for them this year?
Yeah, that's a thing because you have to carry so many pitchers now. You don't have the kind of deep benches that you had. Now, part of what makes up for that is they have the designated hitter. So you don't use
that's true,
quite as much as you used to.
Right.
So you got that. But I think the bench right now, Jock Peterson and when Randall Grichuk, we're not sure if he's going to be ready for the start of the season. It's starting to look like he might miss the first week or so of the season, still recovering from that ankle surgery.
Right.
They were expected to kind of platoon at DH, so whichever one of them is not in the starting lineup is available off the bench. If Jace Peterson is probably another versatile infielder who's going to be a member of the bench. But you're right. Then it leaves you with just like a 3-man bench when you take out the designated hitters as well. So, again, not a lot of flexibility there. But with the designated hitter, not often that Torrey is going to be pinch hitting for a lot of guys.
Yeah. Do they have a couple of guys in AAA who could come up in a pinch if needed?
Yeah, I think they do. It depends on who makes this roster coming out. Pavin Smith is a guy that has had some success at times for them, and they really like him as a hitter. He was just sent down yesterday, so he's an option down there. Grichuk will come off the IL probably a week or so into the season. Maybe Jake McCarthy makes his team, but if he doesn't, then he's an option down there. So they do have some options down there. Don't forget about Jordan Lawler, their top prospect, who's a shortstop. He'll be down in AAA as well.
Cool. So before we go to a break and talk about Major League Baseball in general, what do you see? What do you see as what could be the big surprise or the player that makes the best improvement or thing that fans might not expect that they could end up seeing this year?
If I had to pick something that would be a surprise, I'll go with Blaze Alexander. Infielder, plays second, short, and third. He's a kid that they've liked for a number of years. He's battled some injuries in the minor leagues, but he's having a great camp. May actually force his way onto the team, but we'll see. Either way, I think he's opened some eyes, and he could be a guy that if they have an injury in the infield, could end up being one of those guys that sneaks up and becomes a big contributor that you weren't really expecting.
Yeah. How great a baseball name is Blaze Alexander, by the way. I mean,
yeah, that's a great, and that is his given name too.
Blaze. Can he run? Is he speedy?
Name. Yes, he can run. He's got a cannon for an arm too. So
God.
He's a good little infielder, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw in your preview, he's the number 15 prospect in all of baseball.
No, in the Diamondbacks.
In the Diamondbacks organization, okay.
I think after spring training, though, he's probably going to move up that list a little bit.
Wow, that's great. So, I mean, it sounds like now. Of course, last thing I just realized I wanted to talk to you about this. Obviously, they got to contend with the new evil empire in Major League Baseball, the Los Angeles Dodgers, in their division. I think the Padres are going to be good. I don't know if I think they're going to struggle again to make the playoffs. The Giants improved a little bit, especially with their late signings coming into the beginning of the season. Do you think the Diamondbacks can give the Dodgers a run during the regular season at all?
I don't know about that. I think the Dodgers are going to be tough to beat, certainly. And they were last year, and they have a better team this year. Somehow they won over 100 games last year. But I think what the good news for Diamondback fans is they don't have to out the Dodgers in the regular season as we saw last year. So I think that kind of opened some eyes too and made people realize that, okay, maybe the Dodgers do win this division if they stay healthy and if the guys that they have perform the way they're supposed to. Okay, but that doesn't matter as long as the Diamondbacks find a way into the postseason again.
Yeah, great. So we're going to come back with Steve Gilbert and talk a little bit more about the Major League Baseball season in general and some predictions about playoffs and who might win awards and that kind of stuff. But now I'd like to highlight my terrific sponsor of Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, Damien and Danielle's Sedona Real Estate Group. Nestled in the heart of our breathtaking Sedona, husband and wife Damien Bruno and Danielle Gian have not just lived, but flourished for over 20 years in the Verde Valley. As pillars of the village of Oak Creek, they've raised a family, volunteered tirelessly with the Rotary Club of Sedona Village and Sedona Village Partnership, and have been the proud organizers of the beloved annual community barbecue in the village of Oak Creek for a decade. Their roots run deep and their commitment unwavering. Damien and Danielle aren't just your next real estate agents. They're your neighbors, your friends, and a top Sedona team ready to support you, whether you're buying or selling. With 20 years of real estate expertise and a love for our community that's second to none, choose Damien and Danielle Sedona Village Real Estate Group for your real estate needs. They want to make your Sedona dream a reality. So call them today because their community and experience matter. Coldwell Banker Realty, 928-300-0139, or contact them on the website at SedonaRealEstateAgents.com. And by the way, personal note, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but when my wife B and I, the woman warrior as we call her, right, Ryan? Yeah. We're looking for homes in Sedona. I found Damien and Danielle on a website. They were both from Brooklyn, where my wife and I were moving from, and we hired them to find our house in Sedona. And I can give a personal testimonial of how great these real estate agents in the area are. So check them out. So Steve, let's talk about Major League Baseball. You know, I'm sure you get this question a lot, even though it's already been a year since these rules were instituted. I personally was ecstatic when Major League Baseball decided to end shifting. I couldn't stand the shift. And I was really happy when that happened. I didn't mind the bases being bigger. I didn't think that was a big deal. The pitch clock didn't bother me. I still go back and forth about limiting pickoff throws. I don't know if that's such a great idea. I even came around to, the man on second base in extra innings like they do in Little League, by the way. So how do you think overall? What's your feeling about how the rules worked out last year, and if they were a success?
I think they certainly were. It just made baseball easier to watch.
Yeah. You're
talking about they knocked off 25 minutes a night on average of games, and that's huge. You're asking people to spend their hard-earned money and come out to a game, and people just aren't going to do that for 3.5-hour games anymore. It's just that our society isn't built that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that and it wasn't so much just the time of game, it was the pace of the game. You didn't see a million step-offs or throws to first, and the game just moved at a faster pace.
Yeah.
And I think the shift too, there were more balls put in play that could go for singles. I was never a fan of the shift myself. So I think it turned out to be a really great thing. Now they shaved another couple of seconds off the pitch clock with nobody on base. And it's been kind of a seamless transition again this spring. I think whenever there's a change, especially in baseball, to rules or whatnot, there's so much tradition in the game that the first reaction is, oh no, it's going to change the game forever. And then pretty soon we just all adapt to, the pitch clock and whatever other rule changes there might be. So I think you saw more stolen bases. I think you saw more, base hits, which is something they were looking to get as well. So I think certainly that they have to be pretty pleased with the way that's turned out.
Yeah. This may be sort of a duh kind of question, but how did the pace of the game change and the shorter game times affect you as a sports writer?
You noticed right away that you had, there used to be a lot of time in between pitches and you were, looking stuff up, or you had time to do other things. But now it's just, you could tell the game was just moving faster. It took a little while to kind of, just like a player, I'm sure you tell your players, when you field a ground ball, they have their own internal clock in terms of how quickly they have to get rid of the ball. But you can adjust to that based on who's running. And I think we all had to adjust our internal clocks in terms of how fast the pitches were going to start coming. So for us, I mean, when you cover 140 games or whatever it is a year, you start giving me 25 minutes times all those games, and I get almost a whole week of my life back. So I'm sure it was a big – and I think what you saw from players too, that maybe even initially were a little skeptical about, rushing things.
Right.
they found that standing on their feet for 25 minutes less each night adds up over the course of the season.
Oh, well, I mean, especially the defense. I mean, if you have one of those long innings to begin with, with the old rules, they could be brutal, but at least if you have a long inning now, it's going to be a little bit shorter. And the old adage, when the defense is out on the field for a long time, that's when the errors start happening. They're not as sharp, and so that has to help that. One of the things I caught.
I think it does.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, one of the things I caught.
I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, one of the things I caught last week when they had these spring training games with the prospects playing each other. I caught one of the games on TV. Yeah, I caught one of the games on TV, and they were doing the experiment with being able to contest ball and strike calls using the I don't know what they call it, automated strike zone.
Automatic ball, ABS, automatic ball strike. Yeah.
Automatic ball strike. And I had no idea they were going to use that as an experiment in the games. Maybe they were doing it in the minor leagues last year, but what do you think the future is of that? I mean, it seems almost inevitable, right?
I think it's almost inevitable. They used it last year, particularly in AAA, so players had experience with it. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even realize they were using the automated ball and strike system. That's how seamless it is. So you don't realize that the home plate umpire is not calling balls and strikes.
Right.
You see him make his motion, his mechanic for a strike. You don't realize that that's a buzzer that he's getting buzzed to do that. It just looks completely normal. Now it saves arguments. For instance, Jordan Lawler, the Diamondbacks' top prospect, got called out on the third strike. And when you want to challenge a play, you pat the top of your helmet. And he did that, and they show it right away. It only took less than a minute. And they put it right up on the scoreboard for everyone to see where the pitch was it in the strike zone, where it wasn't. And it turned out that missed by 1.5 inches.
Oh, wow.
According to the metrics on the scoreboard. At bat stays alive. He stays alive and then doubles off the wall. So we kind of saw how that plays out, and that was the first time I'd actually seen it in action, and it didn't hold the game up at all. And each team gets 3 challenges per game, and just like with other challenges, if you're right, you don't lose your challenge, but if you're wrong, you lose the challenge. Yeah,
so 3 challenges per game. I've got to believe that a lot of those challenges are going to be saved for like late innings of games, unless it's a pitch on the corner with bases loaded in the third inning, something like that. I mean, do you see his challenges being held off until late in games?
Yeah, that would probably be something that would have to be discussed, just like when the challenge system came up on the bases and stuff. They had to make some new strategy decisions. One of the things that you heard stories from AAA last year about some players using all 3 of a team's challenges and losing all 3 of them. And Jordan Lawler said, "Yeah, let's just put it to you this way: we know which guys should and should not be using the challenges on the team." So. That again, that'll add another level of strategy if it ends up coming to Major League Baseball. Do you wait? How sure can you? How sure do you have to be before you challenge? So it'll be interesting if that makes its way to Major League Baseball.
Yeah. So being around the field all the time and being around umpires, have you gotten a sense? I mean, forget about last year. I mean, that's already in place, but. Is there already like buzz about how home plate umpires feel about this system?
I have not talked to any of the umpires about that because it hasn't come to Major League Baseball yet. So that isn't something I'm not familiar with how they feel about it. I think a lot of them.
I'm sure they're thinking about it.
Mind. Yeah, a lot of them don't mind the instant replay because then they don't ever have to worry about missing a call that could cost the team a game. I think they have actually kind of grown to like that challenge system.
Right.
It takes some of the burden off of them. They make the best call they can, and they want to get things right. And so the team's going to challenge, they're going to challenge.
Yeah. So I didn't anticipate when we started talking about you being on the show that I would be talking to you about breaking news. And you may not know enough about it since you don't cover the Dodgers, but you might have some opinions or know a little bit. What do you know much about what's going on with this Shohei Ohtani interpreter scandal that's developing in baseball?
You know, when you cover one particular team, you get so immersed in that team that you sometimes lose track of what's going on in the rest of baseball. Right. So I do, you know, I have seen the reports, but I don't have any inside insight onto that. Simply because I have been so wrapped up in who's going to make the final few spots of the Diamondbacks roster that I've kind of left that to the Dodger writers to take care of.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's the case. So let's talk about what may happen just around baseball this year in terms of possible division winners and any predictions you have. Let's start with the National League since that's what you cover. Who do you think is going to end up on top in the three divisions and possible wild card teams?
Ooh, good question. I mean, my predictions. I let's just clarify this by saying, please, nobody take this to a betting window and hold me accountable for any of this.
Don't go to MGM with this.
Yes, I would not do that. I don't understand how people can bet on baseball. I don't know how people, because you can't figure baseball out. I think if anybody followed the Diamondbacks last year, and they should know better.
Well, I've already made
predictions with anything.
Yeah, I've already made a bet that the Mets are going to win more than 82 games. I didn't think that was a hard one for the beginning of the year, but I left it at that. So go ahead. What's going to happen?
So, if I had to pick division winners, I guess I'll say the Dodgers in the West. The Central's kind of a free-for-all.
The Central's tough, yeah.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of teams kind of right there. I'll go with the trendy team. I'll say that Cincinnati somehow finds a way to take the next step.
Oh, interesting. I thought you might say the Cubs. You think the Cubs are going to be in?
Yeah, you know, the Cubs could be there too, and especially with Craig Counsell. But I thought I'd do something a little more, go a little bit more off the board with the Reds. You would look at the East. No offense to your Mets, but I think it's I think the Braves are going to win that one. I think the Phillies are just not quite as good as the Braves. The Braves are just so deep and so good.
Right.
Wild card. Whoa, wild cards are tough.
That could be anybody, like we were just talking about.
100%. So I mean, I'll just pick three. I'll say the Phillies. I will say the Giants. I'll say with their last two acquisitions, they'll get a wild card spot.
Interesting.
And, I'll say the Diamondbacks. It's hard to pick against them after seeing what we saw last year and the fact that they've added some pieces. But I wouldn't count on another return trip to the World Series just because of all the things that have to go right in those circumstances. But
right.
That's what I'll go with when it's the National League.
So you think the Giants are better than the Padres going into this year?
I think so. I think that I wouldn't have said that before they signed Chapman and
Blake Snell,
but I think those two signings really helped them. So I went with them, but they could have easily gone with the Padres in that spot. I think you can make a case for the Cubs, possibly winning that division and pushing the Reds to a wild card spot, or the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals have tried to shore up their pitching a little bit, but they were just so bad last year that it's hard to pick them for me right now.
The thing about the Cincinnati Reds, now that I go through their roster, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier in the show about young players and never knowing how they're going to develop in the season. They have that kind of roster where they have a few like super talented guys who could just explode and carry them into a postseason.
Yeah, 100%. And Matt McClain is one of those guys, an infielder. And ironically, he was drafted by the Diamondbacks, but they weren't able to sign him, and so he went to UCLA, and then ended up being drafted by the Reds. And he was, I think he finished second in the Rookie of the Year voting last year. He had an outstanding season. So they have a couple of guys that are pretty outstanding prospects. And And that's why they were so surprising last year. So if they can continue to build on that, they could be tough.
Yeah. Any thoughts about the American League? I mean, one of the things that occurs to me is even though, Texas won the whole thing last year, I think that the teams at the top in the American League are pretty close together in ability, and I don't see anybody like running away with anything like the Dodgers might or even the Braves could. What's your take on the American League if you know enough about them at this point?
Yeah, it is. I think it is. I agree with you. I think it is going to be wide open. I think the Twins probably are the heavy favorite in the Central. They had a really nice year last year, and they've added a couple of pieces this offseason. The Astros are always. I always going to count the Astros in until they prove differently.
Yeah, that's true.
Over the years, they've just been so consistent. And again, that American League East is going to be a real beast with, you got the Yankees and you got the Blue Jays and the Orioles. I mean, the Orioles talking again about some of the young talent, they didn't even have room for Jackson Holiday on their opening day roster. So they've got a lot of exciting young players that if they put it all together, you saw what they could do last year. They're another year older and a year more mature, and they'll have Jackson Holiday at some point, and they've also got they acquired Corbin Burns too. So I think that they're certainly a team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, as long as they finish ahead of the Yankees, I'll be a happy camper.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes. I don't know about that, but we'll see. I mean, the Yankees have had some injury issues too. I mean, Garrett Cole, that's a big injury for them. So,
that's huge. And I mean, if Garrett Cole is out for any length of time going into, let's say June, and we don't know really what the timetable is going to be on that, they could be in a little trouble with that rotation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, any predictions on guys having a monster year or anybody who might have a comeback season from last season? What have you thought much about that yet?
I haven't really thought a ton about that. I think it'd be interesting to see. Everyone wants to know, is there another level for Corbin Carroll, which just seems so hard to fathom given the great year that he had last year. But he's a guy that continues to work and continues to strive to get better. I think he could have a kind of an even better year, possibly. He's somebody that I keep an eye on. So I think that's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see how Craig Counsell does in Chicago.
Yeah.
I think, they're going to pay him $8 million a year to manage. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of effect he has on all that.
So as long as you brought up the Diamondbacks again, talk a little bit about Torey Lovullo and what kind of manager he is. I mean, he obviously did a great job with that team last year. They gave him a contract extension for 3 more years. What's Torey like, and what impressed you about the way he managed that team?
I think Torey's biggest strength as a manager is his ability to build relationships with his players, and that's one of the key things for managers today. We're now talking about back in the day when you had managers like Earl Weaver or Billy Martin or Dick Williams, guys who were intimidating and could yell at their players and, strike fear in the hearts of their players. Now it's more about how can you, keep your players, communicate with your players, keep them on the same page. And Torey does a really nice job of that. You'll see him during batting practice. He always makes his rounds out in the outfield and talks with different players individually just to kind of get a feel for where their mindset is. So I think that is really his strength is kind of building that relationship with guys to where guys trust him when maybe he has to take them out of a game or maybe he makes a decision they don't agree with. They do trust him to be able to do that. So for Torey, I think that's probably his greatest strength, and I think you saw, the young team believe in him last fall too. I think he managed very aggressively in the playoffs. I think he outmanaged Phillies Rob Thompson in the NLCS. Felt like Rob Thompson was managing games in May the way he was running his bullpen, where Torey was managing more with the urgency that you need in October.
Yeah, Torrey really developed a great feel for the roster that he had, and it's almost like he built up the momentum to get them into the postseason and be at their best at that point in the year, which is what you got to do. I mean, 162 games is a slog, as you know, and if you can build that momentum at the right time and everything clicks, you can go far, especially in baseball today, for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I think being able to run a clubhouse and get everybody pushing in the same direction is the biggest thing for a manager, and that plays into Torrey's strength. So, yeah, I think that's a good situation for the Diamondbacks right now.
So I want to talk a little bit about you, because we're meeting for the first time on the radio here. We haven't gotten a chance to talk too much. I'm curious about your kind of origin story as a baseball writer and how you got into the business. Tell us a little bit about your career path there.
Wow. Well, I was a high school baseball player here at Corona del Sol High School in Tempe, and the local newspaper was looking for somebody to call in the scores for each of the sports back in the day, and this is obviously before email and almost before personal computers.
Oh, I didn't think you were that. Anyway, I didn't think you were that old.
Yeah, no, I'm 54, so I
oh wow, you don't look it. You're like me. You look young for your age.
So anyway, my baseball, the varsity baseball coach I was playing on the JV as a sophomore at the time.
What position did you play?
I was an infielder. I was second baseman, shortstop.
Cool.
And, so he recommended me to do that, so I started doing that, and then just kind of fell in love with going down to the newsroom, and started covering high school sports for them when I got my driver's license the next year, and it just kind of went from there. I covered the minor league team here, the Phoenix Firebirds, for 4 years.
Uh-huh.
I was their PR director my last year of college, and then thought maybe I would get into baseball public relations. So I went and did an internship with the White Sox in 1993 when they won the AL West with Frank Thomas and Bo Jackson and Jack McDowell and those guys. Came back here in 94 and was the PR director of the Arizona Fall League. So I handled Michael Jordan's public relations for a few months while he was down here. And then went to the Milwaukee Brewers, where I was their assistant PR director for 3 years before, at the end of the 97 season, people said there was this thing called the internet that was going to be big. And Jerry Colangelo was looking for somebody to write for the websites for the Diamondbacks, Suns, Mercury and Rattlers, who he owned. And so I came back to do that. And then Major League Baseball took over all the team's websites in 2000, and I've been doing this job for them ever since.
That's good. Having a background in public relations for a team gives you really good insight into what those guys deal with as a writer. So I'll bet you're a lot more sensitive to the job they have than most of the other writers are.
Yeah, it gives you a different perspective. I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I think it does. I think it does help me.
Right. So tell us where we can read your stuff about the Diamondbacks and how often you post and all that good stuff.
Well, we post every day, so you can read it at dbacks.com or MLB.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Steve Gilbert MLB. I don't tweet quite as much as I used to, but I still tweet links and stuff out there, so feel free to give me a follow there.
All right, that's great. Steve, this was really good stuff. I'm glad you were able to do this. You have some really great insights on the team. I hope our listeners in Sedona, especially the ones who follow the D-backs, got a handle on what's going to happen in the season, which starts on Thursday. Who are the Diamondbacks opening with?
They got a 4-game series with the Rockies before your beloved New York Yankees come to town for a 3-game set.
All right, I'm really rooting for the Diamondbacks in that series. Anyway, Steve, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate you being on the show, and let's try to do it sometime during the season. We can catch up in the middle of the year and see where everything is.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you guys take care.
All right, thanks so much. That's Steve Gilbert, Arizona Diamondbacks writer for MLB.com. Well, we're wrapping up. That's all the time we have for our show today. I want to thank Steve Gilbert. Special thanks to my sponsor, Damian and Danielle, Sedona Real Estate Group, because community and experience matter. Thanks as always to Ryan Thompson in the booth. And by the way, tell your friends who couldn't hear the show today that they can listen to a podcast version anytime on Apple Podcasts. You can find the show on Spotify and probably some other smaller venues that I don't know about that I have to check on. Please tune in next week when we're going to have a little heavier topic on the show. Very serious and important issue of gun safety and gun reform. And my guest will be an advocate named Larry Betts, who is also a personal fitness trainer based in the village of Oak Creek, and of course happens to be my personal trainer who gets me ready for my baseball games when I go up to Scottsdale. So I appreciate everybody listening. Again, this has been Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks on Mellow Mountain Radio, KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM.